Priscilla in, the family out. Many times I've been asked about this situation with Graceland and how it evolved and what it is today.
When Donna Presley says that Priscilla orchestrated a hostile takeover of Graceland while the actual Presley family was systematically pushed out, she's not speaking in metaphors. She's not being dramatic. She's describing exactly what happened. A calculated seizure of power that nobody talks about because the woman who pulled it off spent 50 years making sure her version of the story was the only one anyone ever heard. Let's be crystal clear about what we're dealing with here. This isn't a dispute over who should manage Elvis's legacy. This isn't family members bickering over sentimental keepsakes. This is about how someone who legally stopped being a Presley in 1973, 4 years before Elvis even died, ended up with complete control over his estate, his home, his business empire, and his entire family legacy.
I'm not going to go back and say this isn't true, that's not true, I can't do that. All I can do is write about the person that I knew, that I saw.
Think about that timeline for just a second. Priscilla divorced Elvis in 1973. Their marriage was over, legally, officially, definitively over. She got her settlement. She got custody of Lisa Marie. She moved on with her life. By all reasonable standards, her direct connection to Elvis's future estate should have ended right there. But it didn't. Because when Elvis died in 1977, Priscilla somehow positioned herself not as the ex-wife, not as the mother of his daughter, but as the key executor and decision-maker for everything Elvis left behind. And the question nobody asked loudly enough at the time was, how did that happen? Donna Presley has an answer, and it's not the fairy tale about a devoted ex-wife stepping up to save a crumbling estate. It's a story about manipulation, strategic timing, and a vulnerable man who couldn't protect his family when they needed him most. That man was Vernon Presley, Elvis's father. Vernon was the executor of Elvis's will. Vernon was the one who was supposed to protect the family interests. Vernon was the one who knew Elvis's real wishes, who understood the family dynamics, who had spent his entire life watching out for his son. But Vernon was dying. And according to Donna, Priscilla knew it. She saw the window of opportunity and she walked right through it. Vernon Presley died in 1979, just 2 years after Elvis. And in those 2 years, while he was grieving his son, while he was battling his own declining health, while he was emotionally and physically vulnerable, Priscilla was positioning herself. She was building relationships with lawyers. She was inserting herself into estate decisions. She was making herself indispensable. Donna claims that Priscilla specifically befriended Vernon after the divorce, not out of genuine affection, not out of concern for family unity, but because she understood that Vernon was the gatekeeper. He was the obstacle between her and complete control. And if she could influence him, if she could make him dependent on her advice, if she could be there whispering in his ear while he was at his weakest, she could reshape the entire power structure. And that's exactly what she did. By the time Vernon died, Priscilla had positioned herself as a co-executor of the estate. She had legal authority. She had decision-making power. And most importantly, she had something the actual Presley family didn't have. She had a plan. Because here's what makes this so calculated. Priscilla didn't just want access to the estate. She wanted control, total control. And control meant making sure that nobody else could challenge her, question her, or stand in her way. So she didn't just take over Graceland. She weaponized it against the family. Donna describes watching this happen in real time. She watched as family members who had been part of Elvis's inner circle, cousins who grew up with him, relatives who worked at Graceland, people who had actual relationships with Elvis were slowly pushed out. Not violently, not obviously, but systematically. First, it was framed as professionalization. We need to run this like a business, not a family operation. That sounds reasonable, right? That sounds like smart management. Except what it actually meant was, the people who loved Elvis are being replaced by people who are loyal to Priscilla. Then it was about access. Family members who used to be able to visit Graceland freely, who considered it a second home, suddenly needed permission. They needed appointments. They needed approval. The place that was supposed to be their family legacy became a fortress they couldn't enter without asking Priscilla's permission. And then it was about money. Because once you control access and you control operations, you control the profits. And Graceland became incredibly profitable. We're talking millions upon millions of dollars flowing through that estate every single year. But who benefited? Did the Presley family, The actual blood relatives who shared Elvis's DNA, who grew up in poverty with him, who were there before fame and fortune. Did they see any of that money? Did they get any of those profits? Did they have any say in how their relative's legacy was being commercialized? According to Donna, no, they were cut out. Systematically, deliberately, completely cut out. And the cruelest part, the part that reveals just how calculated this takeover was, is that family members who struggled financially, who needed help, who could have used support from the estate that bore their family name, were denied. They were told the money wasn't available, or that it wasn't appropriate, or that there were legal restrictions. Meanwhile, Priscilla was building a multi-million-dollar empire for herself. She was getting consulting fees, appearance fees, book deals, producer credits. She was becoming rich and famous off Elvis's name while his actual family was locked out. This is what Donna means when she says it was a hostile takeover. Because a takeover isn't just about seizing control. It's about eliminating the competition. It's about making sure that nobody else can challenge your authority. And Priscilla did that by systematically erasing the Presley family from their own legacy. She didn't just take over Graceland. She transformed it into something that actively excluded the people who should have mattered most. She turned Elvis's home into a monument to herself, with herself as the sole interpreter, the sole authority, the sole voice that mattered. And when Lisa Marie, Elvis's own daughter, his only child, when she felt like a stranger in her own father's house, when she felt unwelcome at Graceland, when she felt like she had to ask permission to access her own inheritance, that wasn't an accident. That was by design. Because Priscilla didn't just take over Graceland. She turned it into a fortress designed to keep the Presley family out of their own history. The erasure didn't happen overnight. It was methodical. It was strategic. And it was designed to look like progress while it systematically destroyed the family's connection to their own legacy. Donna Presley watched it happen from the inside. She saw how Priscilla didn't just change Graceland, she purged it. And the purge started with the people who knew Elvis best. Think about who was at Graceland when Elvis was alive. It wasn't just Elvis and Priscilla playing house. It was cousins, extended family, childhood friends, people who had been part of Elvis's world since before he could afford that world. These were the people who remembered him as a kid in Tupelo, the people who were there when he bought his first guitar, the people who celebrated with him when that first record hit, the people who actually knew him. And one by one, Priscilla made sure they were gone. It started with the jobs. Family members who had worked at Graceland for years, handling security, managing the property, coordinating events, suddenly found their positions restructured. That's the word Priscilla used, restructured, as if it was just smart business, as if it had nothing to do with replacing people who were loyal to Elvis with people who were loyal to her. Donna talks about cousins who had dedicated their lives to helping Elvis, who had been by his side through everything, who considered working at Graceland an honor and a family responsibility. They weren't just fired, they were erased from the narrative. Their contributions were minimized. Their years of service were dismissed. And when Graceland opened to the public and the official tour started, their names weren't mentioned. Their stories weren't told. It was as if they had never existed. Because that's how you take over a legacy. You don't just seize control of the property, you rewrite the history so that you're the only one who matters. And it wasn't just the employees, it was family access to Graceland itself. Before Priscilla's takeover, Graceland was still a family home. Yes, Elvis was gone. Yes, it was becoming a business. But it was still the place where the Presley family gathered. It was where they felt connected to Elvis. It was where they could walk through the rooms he walked through, sit in the chairs he sat in, feel close to him. Priscilla changed that. Suddenly, family members needed permission to visit. They needed to schedule appointments. They needed to go through Priscilla's people, lawyers, managers, assistants, just to walk through the front door of what was supposed to be their family home. And if Priscilla decided you weren't welcome, you didn't get in, simple as that. Donna describes the humiliation of it, the pain of being treated like a stranger, like some random fan who needed special clearance when this was her cousin's house. When she had memories in those rooms, when she had shared meals at that table, laughed in that living room, mourned in that space when Elvis died. But Priscilla didn't care about those memories, because those memories threatened her narrative. If the family was around, if they were present, if they were telling their stories, then Priscilla couldn't be the sole authority on who Elvis was. She couldn't position herself as the only person who truly understood him. So the family had to go. And then there was the money. Oh, the money. Graceland became a goldmine. We're not talking about modest profits. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars generated every single year from tour, merchandise, licensing deals, media appearances. Elvis Presley Enterprises became a massive business empire. But the Presley family, the actual blood relatives, saw almost none of it. Donna reveals something that should make your blood boil. While Priscilla was building her fortune, while she was flying around the world giving paid interviews about Elvis, while she was negotiating movie deals and collecting consulting fees, there were Presley family members struggling to pay their bills. These weren't distant relatives trying to cash in on a famous name. These were people who had been there, people who had supported Elvis when he had nothing, people who loved him not because he was a superstar but because he was family. And when they asked the estate for help, when they reached out and said, "We're struggling, we need assistance, this is our family too," they were told no. They were told the estate couldn't help them. They were told there were legal complications, or that the money was tied up, or that it just wasn't possible. Meanwhile, Priscilla was living in luxury. Meanwhile, she was buying properties and funding her lifestyle and building her personal brand, all off the Elvis Presley name. That's not estate management. That's theft. That's taking something that should have benefited an entire family and hoarding it for yourself. But perhaps the most devastating part of this erasure wasn't what happened to Donna or the cousins or the extended family. It was what happened to Lisa Marie, Elvis's daughter, his only child, the person who should have felt most at home at Graceland, most connected to her father's legacy, most supported by the estate bearing his name. Instead, Lisa Marie felt like an outsider. Donna witnessed the distance between Priscilla and Lisa Marie growing over the years. She watched as Lisa Marie would come to Graceland and feel uncomfortable, unwelcome, like she was intruding. She watched as Lisa Marie's relationship with her father's memory became mediated through Priscilla, filtered through someone who had her own agenda, her own narrative to protect. And that's when Donna understood the full scope of what Priscilla had done. This wasn't just about controlling a property or managing a business. This was about controlling the entire emotional and historical landscape of Elvis Presley. Priscilla had positioned herself as the gatekeeper not just to Graceland the building, but to Elvis the person, Elvis the father, Elvis the icon. If you wanted to connect with Elvis's legacy, you had to go through Priscilla. If you wanted to tell a story about Elvis, you needed Priscilla's approval. If you wanted access to his memory, you had to accept Priscilla's version of events. And for Lisa Marie, that meant her own relationship with her father's memory was being controlled by her mother. The woman who divorced him. The woman who, according to Donna, was barely around in Elvis's final years. The woman who had her own life, her own relationships, her own priorities that had nothing to do with Elvis. That woman now owned her father's legacy, and Lisa Marie had to ask permission to be part of it. No wonder she felt like a stranger in her own father's home. No wonder the relationship between mother and daughter deteriorated. No wonder Lisa Marie eventually cut Priscilla out of her trust. Because Priscilla didn't just take over Graceland. She turned it into a fortress designed to keep the Presley family out of their own history. Here's the question that should have been asked 45 years ago, but wasn't. How does an ex-wife who divorced Elvis Presley in 1973 end up controlling his entire estate when he dies in 1977? Think about that legally for just a moment. When you get divorced, you sever your legal connection to that person. You're no longer their spouse. You're no longer their next of kin. You have no automatic legal claim to their future assets. That's the whole point of divorce. You're splitting up, going your separate ways, ending the legal partnership. So when Elvis died, Priscilla should have had exactly one connection to his estate. As the mother of his minor child, Lisa Marie. She should have been Lisa Marie's guardian, managing Lisa Marie's inheritance until she came of age. That's it. That's the only legal role she should have had. Instead, Priscilla became the executor. She became the decision-maker. She became the person who controlled everything. How did that happen? According to Donna, it happened because Priscilla saw an opportunity and she took it. And that opportunity was Vernon Presley. When Elvis died in 1977, his will named Vernon as executor. Vernon was supposed to manage the estate, protect Lisa Marie's inheritance, and make sure Elvis's wishes were honored. And for 2 years, that's technically what happened. Vernon was in charge. But here's what Donna wants you to understand. Vernon was grieving. He had just lost his son, his only son, in the most devastating, traumatic way possible. Elvis died at 42 years old in his own bathroom. Vernon found himself burying his child. That kind of grief doesn't just hurt, it destroys you. It leaves you vulnerable, confused, barely able to function. And Priscilla, according to Donna, used that vulnerability. Donna claims that after the divorce, Priscilla made a very deliberate effort to stay close to Vernon. She positioned herself as helpful, concerned, supportive. She made herself available. She offered advice. She acted like she cared about Vernon's well-being, like she wanted to help him navigate this difficult time. But it wasn't about Vernon. It was about access. It was about influence. It was about making sure that when Elvis eventually died, and let's be honest, by the mid-70s, Elvis's health was deteriorating rapidly, so this wasn't unforeseeable. When he died, Priscilla would be positioned to step into power. And it worked. Because when Vernon was dealing with Elvis's death, when he was emotionally shattered and physically declining himself, who was there whispering advice? Who was there offering to help manage things? Who was there positioning herself as indispensable? Priscilla. And Vernon, in his grief and his illness, made her a co-executor of the estate. He gave her legal authority. He gave her decision-making power. He essentially handed her the keys to the entire Presley empire. Now, was Vernon manipulated? Was he pressured? Was he too sick to fully understand what he was agreeing to? Donna believes yes. She believes that Vernon, if he had been healthy, if he had been thinking clearly, would never have given Priscilla that kind of control. He knew the family dynamics. He knew Priscilla had moved on with her life. He knew she wasn't really part of the family anymore. But he was dying, and Priscilla was there, and she got what she wanted. Vernon died in 1979, just 2 years after Elvis. And when he died, the last barrier between Priscilla and total control was gone. The will was structured so that after Vernon's death, Priscilla became one of 3 executors alongside the National Bank of Commerce and Joseph Hanks, Elvis's accountant. But here's the thing about being one of 3 executors when you're the only one with a personal stake in the outcome, the only one with media savvy, the only one with a plan. You can dominate. You can control the narrative. You can make the decisions because everyone else is deferring to you as Elvis's widow who knew him best. And that's exactly what Priscilla did. So why didn't the Presley family fight back? Why didn't they challenge this in court? Why didn't they scream from the rooftops that this was wrong? Donna has an answer for that too, and it's heartbreaking. They were afraid of looking greedy, afraid of appearing like they were just after Elvis's money, afraid that if they challenged Priscilla publicly, the media would destroy them. Because think about the optics, grieving family members fighting the widow over money. That's not a good look. That makes you seem petty, opportunistic, disrespectful to Elvis's memory. And Priscilla knew that. She knew the family wouldn't fight because they cared too much about protecting Elvis's reputation. They didn't want his death to be followed by ugly legal battles and family drama splashed across tabloids. They wanted to grieve in peace. They wanted to honor his memory quietly. So they stayed silent, and Priscilla took advantage of that silence. But here's where Donna's accusations get really explosive. She's challenging the entire Priscilla saved Graceland narrative that we've been fed for decades. The official story is that when Elvis died, the estate was nearly bankrupt. There were massive expenses, declining revenue, mounting debts. And Priscilla, in her brilliance, came up with the idea to open Graceland to the public, turning it into a tourist attraction that generated millions and saved the entire estate from financial ruin. That's the story. That's what we've been told over and over. Priscilla the savior. Priscilla the business genius. Priscilla who rescued Elvis's legacy from certain destruction. Donna says that's a lie. She claims the estate was never as close to bankruptcy as Priscilla pretended. Yes, there were expenses. Yes, there were challenges. But the idea that Graceland was on the verge of being lost, that Lisa Marie's inheritance was about to disappear, that the whole thing was collapsing, Donna says that was exaggerated, dramatized, blown out of proportion to justify Priscilla's takeover. Because here's the thing, if the estate is in crisis, if it's about to fail, then whoever steps in to save it becomes a hero. They become essential. They become untouchable. And that's exactly what Priscilla needed. She needed a crisis so she could be the solution. She needed people to believe that without her, everything would fall apart. Because once people believe that, you can do whatever you want. You can consolidate power, push out family members, control the narrative, pocket the profits, and anyone who questions you looks like they're threatening the very thing you saved. It's genius, really. Manipulative and cruel, but genius. So Priscilla didn't just take control of Graceland. She made it seem like she had no choice, like she was reluctantly stepping up to rescue everyone. Meanwhile, she was building an empire. Her empire, not the Presley family's empire, hers. And for 45 years, nobody questioned it. Nobody pushed back. Nobody demanded to see the receipts or challenged the narrative or asked the obvious question. If you loved Elvis so much, why did you divorce him? And if you moved on with your life, why are you still here? But now, with Lisa Marie gone and Riley Keough fighting to reclaim what's rightfully hers, Donna is saying what everyone was too afraid to say. Priscilla didn't save Graceland. She stole it, and the family wants it back. For nearly 50 years, the Presley family stayed silent. They watched Priscilla build her empire. They watched her control the narrative. They watched her profit off Elvis's name while they were pushed further and further into the shadows, and they said nothing. So the question burning in everyone's mind right now is, why is Donna speaking up now? What changed? What finally broke that decades-long silence? The answer is both simple and devastating. Lisa Marie is gone. When Lisa Marie died in January 2023, something shifted in the family dynamic. Because as long as Lisa Marie was alive, there was still hope. Hope that she would eventually reclaim full control of her father's estate. Hope that she would set the record straight. Hope that she would be the one to finally tell the truth about Priscilla. And Lisa Marie tried. She cut Priscilla out of her trust. She made it crystal clear that she didn't want her mother controlling anything after she was gone. She wanted her children, specifically Riley, to have control. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't a decision made in anger or haste. That was Lisa Marie, after a lifetime of watching her mother operate, saying, "I don't trust you with my father's legacy, and I don't trust you with my children's inheritance." But Lisa Marie died before she could fully execute that plan. She died before she could go public with everything she knew. She died with the truth still locked inside her. And that's when Donna realized, if she didn't speak now, if the family didn't start telling the truth now, it might never get told. Because Priscilla wasn't going to tell it. Priscilla was going to keep spinning her version of events, keep positioning herself as the devoted widow, keep profiting off the sympathy and the carefully constructed image. Donna couldn't let that happen anymore. Not with Lisa Marie gone. Not with Riley fighting an uphill battle against a grandmother who has 50 years of practice manipulating public perception. So Donna made a choice. A risky, costly, potentially devastating choice. She decided to break the silence. And here's what you need to understand about that choice. Donna has nothing to gain from this. She's not angling for money. She's not trying to become famous. She's not launching a book deal or a media tour. She's simply telling the truth, knowing full well that it's going to make her a target. Because that's what happens when you challenge someone as powerful as Priscilla Presley. You become the villain in her story. Her PR team will spin you as bitter, jealous, delusional. Her defenders will attack you on social media. Her lawyers might come after you. The media might paint you as just another family member trying to cash in on Elvis's name. Donna knows all of that, and she's doing it anyway. Because this isn't about her. This is about justice. Justice for Elvis, whose memory has been filtered through someone who divorced him and moved on with her life. Justice for Lisa Marie, who spent her entire life under her mother's shadow and control. Justice for Riley, who's trying to honor her mother's wishes while fighting a grandmother who won't let go. And justice for the entire Presley family that's been erased from their own history. And that brings us to Riley Keough, because Riley is the one who stands to benefit most from Donna speaking out. Think about Riley's position right now. She's trying to manage her grandfather's estate according to her mother's wishes. She's trying to honor Lisa Marie's legacy while protecting her younger sisters. She's trying to maintain some connection to Graceland and the Presley name while dealing with a grandmother who immediately challenged Lisa Marie's trust after her death. That trust challenge wasn't a coincidence. That wasn't Priscilla being confused or concerned about legal technicalities. That was Priscilla doing what she's always done, fighting to maintain control, to stay relevant, to keep her hands on the money and the power. And Riley had to fight her, in court, publicly. Riley had to go up against her own grandmother just to honor her mother's final wishes. How do you win that fight when the woman you're fighting against has spent 5 decades crafting a sympathetic public image? How do you push back against someone the world sees as Elvis's eternal widow without looking like the ungrateful, greedy granddaughter? You can't, not alone. But with Donna speaking out, with a blood relative publicly stating that Priscilla has been lying and manipulating for years, that changes everything. Suddenly, Riley isn't the villain. Riley isn't the one causing family drama. Riley is the one trying to break a cycle of control and exploitation that's been going on since before she was born. Riley is trying to do what her mother wanted, what her grandfather would have wanted if he'd known how things would turn out. Donna's accusations give Riley validation. They give her ammunition. They give her the public support she needs to stand up to Priscilla without being destroyed in the process. And here's what should make Priscilla genuinely worried. Donna probably isn't the only one willing to speak now. She's just the first. There are other family members who witnessed the same things Donna did. There are people who worked at Graceland who saw how the family was pushed out. There are friends of Elvis who watched Priscilla maneuver into power. There are people who knew Lisa Marie and heard her side of the story. They've all been quiet. They've all been watching to see what happens when someone finally speaks up. And if Donna doesn't get destroyed for telling the truth, if the public actually listens, if the media actually investigates, if Riley actually benefits from this information, then others will feel safe enough to come forward too. That's what Priscilla should fear most. Not one person telling the truth, but a flood of truth-tellers who can corroborate each other's stories, who can provide evidence, who can systematically dismantle the narrative she spent 50 years constructing. Because this isn't just about the Presley family anymore. This is about something much bigger. This is about who gets to control legacy. This is about whether blood family or strategic opportunists have more claim to someone's memory. This is about what happens when the person with the microphone isn't the person with the truth. And Donna Presley is saying, enough. The world deserves to know who Priscilla really is. The family deserves their legacy back. Riley deserves to honor her mother without fighting a grandmother who's been exploiting this family for half a century. This is just the beginning. More truth is coming. And Priscilla's 50-year empire, it's built on lies, and lies don't last forever. Not when someone finally has the courage to tell the truth. If you believe blood family should control their own legacy, drop a comment right now. If Donna's telling the truth, share this video before it gets buried. Hit subscribe and smash that notification bell because this battle for Graceland is exploding, and what comes next will shake the entire Presley empire to its foundation. The truth doesn't need permission anymore. It just needs you to listen.